Welcome to this Tybootha presentation, where we will discuss the differences between astrology versus astronomy.
Yeah, it's a topic that causes a lot of confusion, right?
Totally. And for this deep dive, we're actually drawing from the appendix of James Michael's book, A Journey Through Time. The History of Astronomy, from Myths to Astrophysics, a concise introduction.
Oh, that's a great resource.
It really is. And you can find that book over on Amazon, by the way. Our goal today, really, is to help clarify for you the distinctions between these two.
Explore those shared roots because they do have them.
Exactly. And figure out why one went down the path of, rigorous science, while the other kind of stayed in the realm of belief systems.
Okay, let's dive in. It's fascinating right off the bat how historically they were basically the same thing, weren't they?
Yeah, completely intertwined. It all stemmed from that basic human thing of looking up at the sky and wondering, what's going on up there?
Right. The source material mentions this early idea of a celestial sphere, stars fixed on it, and then the sun, the moon, the planets they knew back then.
Which included the sun and moon themselves in their count, didn't they?
They did, yes. The 7 classical planets. And they thought these all revolved around a flat Earth.
You can just imagine them seeing these moving lights against the fixed stars and thinking they must be special. Gods, maybe.
Absolutely. Often seen as deities, things to be worshipped. I mean, look at ancient mythology. Sun gods, moon goddesses, planets named after deities. It was all connected.
And the zodiac signs we know today, they came out of this too.
They did, but maybe not how you'd think initially. The book points out the zodiac actually started as a way to track time.
Like a celestial calendar.
Pretty much, yeah. An early form of calendar mapping the sun's path against the background stars throughout the year. Super important for knowing when seasons were changing.
So less, what's my sign, and more, when should we plant the crops?
Exactly. Practical timekeeping was the original driver.
Okay, but let's talk about those constellations themselves. Like, Orion's belt isn't actually a belt, right? It's just how we see it from here.
That's such a crucial point. The book really hammers this home. Constellations aren't real physical groupings out there in space.
Just patterns we make up.
Sort of, yeah. Patterns we perceive from our specific viewpoint on Earth, shapes humans assign meaning to. Really, it's just light from incredibly distant stars burning balls of gas.
Burning gas that looks fixed to us, even though everything's zooming through space at insane speeds. Puts things in perspective.
It really does. And, the book mentions how even Polaris, our North Star, it won't always be the North Star.
Because the Earth wobbles.
Axial precession, a slow wobble. So the night sky itself changes over long timescales. It's not static at all.
Which kind of leads to this interesting idea the book raises about, well, geographical bias in astrology.
Oh, definitely. The system we know, the zodiac signs like Leo, Aries, whatever, that system really developed in the Northern Hemisphere.
Because those were the constellations people could easily see and name from there.
Precisely. But stand in the Southern Hemisphere, look up, and those same star patterns look different, or you see entirely different ones because of Earth's tilt and where you are.
So how can a system claim to be universal if it's based on what you see from only one part of the planet?
That's the question, isn't it? It raises big issues about universality. Like, if astrology had started in Australia, maybe it'd be a Southern Cross sign instead of a Scorpio.
Imagine that. The book even jokes about, like, if you flip the chart for the Southern Hemisphere, does that flip your destiny too?
Yeah, it playfully highlights how arbitrary some of the interpretations can seem when you look at the physical reality. The core idea is being born under a sign.
Or which sign depends on where you were standing when someone named it centuries ago.
Essentially, yes. And initially, those early skywatchers had more immediate concerns than personality traits.
Right, back to the practical stuff. Survival.
Absolutely. Tracking the sun for solstices, equinoxes, knowing the longest day, the start of spring, that was fundamental for agriculture.
And the moon too, right? Planting by the moon.
Yep. Lunar cycles were closely watched for planting, harvesting, maybe even tides, though the gravitational link wasn't understood then.
The book mentioned the Egyptians and Sirius.
Oh yeah, the heliacal rising of Sirius when it first became visible just before sunrise. For the Egyptians, that predicted the annual flooding of the Nile.
Wow. That's like clockwork for their entire civilization.
Incredibly important. And constellations got linked to seasons too, like Virgo often being associated with fertility, harvest time.
Okay, so you have this practical observation layer, but then it shifts.
Yeah.
The stars and planets become more than just markers. They become powerful.
That's the big leap. From useful signs to divine beings or forces believed to actively govern life on Earth, the sun wasn't just a light. It was a god with power.
And the Babylonians were really into this, recording everything.
Meticulously. They kept detailed records of where planets were, eclipses, comets, and then tried to match those with events on Earth floods, wars, the king's health.
Trying to find a pattern, a cause and effect.
Exactly. Building this belief that if you could read the signs right, you could predict or understand earthly events based on celestial ones. It fostered this idea of predictable influence.
And this wasn't just folk belief, right? Rulers used it.
Oh, absolutely. Kings and emperors had court astrologers. Big decisions, when to launch a campaign, hold a coronation, often involve astrological consultations. It reinforced this view of a cosmos where everything was divinely ordered and interconnected.
And the zodiac signs evolved too, from just marking parts of the sky.
To being assigned specific characteristics. Aries is impulsive, Taurus is stubborn. These traits supposedly came from the sign ruling the sky when you were born.
But somewhere along the line, this path of looking at the stars split, didn't it? Into astrology and what we now call astronomy.
It did. It was a slow divergence, not a sudden break. But a key scientific discovery that really highlighted the difference was understanding the precession of the equinoxes.
That wobble again.
That wobble again. Our source explains it really clearly. Because of that slow shift in Earth's axis over centuries, the constellations are no longer in the same spot relative to the calendar dates that traditional astrology uses.
Wait, so the dates for, say, Leo in astrology don't actually match up with when the sun is astronomically in the constellation Leo anymore?
For the most part, no. There's about a one-sign shift. So if your horoscope says you're a Leo, astronomically, the sun was likely in the constellation Cancer, or maybe even Virgo when you were born, depending on the exact date.
Whoa, that kind of messes with the whole born under a sign thing pretty fundamentally.
It certainly poses a challenge to the traditional system, and this growing gap between astrological tradition and observational reality is part of what pushed astronomy towards empirical methods. Astrology moving more towards divination.
Started getting looked at more skeptically through a scientific lens.
Exactly. And when you apply that kind of scientific scrutiny, the claims of astrology start to look, well, less solid.
Because the big difference is predictive power, isn't it? Astronomy makes predictions we can test.
Precisely. Astronomy uses the scientific method. Observe, hypothesize, predict, test, refine. If observations contradict the hypothesis has to change. Astrology, well, it doesn't operate that way.
Its predictions tend to be vague or interpreted after the fact.
Often, yes. And it hasn't demonstrated consistent, repeatable accuracy in predicting specific events or personality traits beyond what you'd expect by chance. The scientific method demands testability and falsifiability, the ability to be proven wrong. Astrology often lacks that.
The book even brings up that 1985 study in Nature.
Ah, yes, the Carlson study. A double-blind test. They had astrologers try to match personality profiles to natal charts.
And the result.
Their accuracy was no better than random guessing. It was a pretty significant blow from a scientific perspective.
And the book also digs into the fundamental assumptions, like the moment of birth being the critical thing.
Right. Why that specific moment? Socially and legally, it's significant you get a birth certificate. But cosmically, why then?
Is there some magical switch that flips when the baby emerges? It seems arbitrary.
It does seem arbitrary from a physical standpoint.
Yeah.
If celestial forces were really shaping us in this deterministic way, wouldn't conception maybe make more sense? Or some other point in development?
But then you get into impossible debates about when life starts.
Exactly. These are deep philosophical waters that astrology doesn't really have clear answers for. It relies on this culturally accepted moment, birth, without a strong physical justification for why that moment triggers your destiny.
Plus, the book points out, even the time on the birth certificate might not be precise enough.
Yeah, that's a fascinating detail. Birth certificates usually use standard time zones, but your actual local solar time could be different depending on where you are within that zone if precise timing is crucial.
Then using time zones introduces a level of inaccuracy right from the start.
It does seem to undermine the claim that extreme precision is needed.
So, okay, science does recognize some influence from space, right? Like gravity.
Oh, absolutely. The moon's gravity is the primary driver of ocean tides. That's undeniable. And there's research into subtle gravitational effects or maybe magnetic field interactions on, say, biological rhythms or even things like tectonic stress.
But these are broad physical forces, not Mars making me argue with my boss.
Exactly. There's no scientifically validated mechanism or evidence showing that the specific positions of distant planets directly influence individual human personalities or daily life events in the way astrology claims.
Earth's magnetic field interacts with the sun. Sure, affects satellites, maybe some animals.
Right. Solar flares, geomagnetic storms, those are real phenomena with measurable effects. But the magnetic fields of, say, Jupiter or Saturn are incredibly weak by the time they reach Earth and have no known effect on individuals. Celestial mechanics shape our environment, yes, but not our personal fate.
Which brings us to newspaper horoscopes. I think we all kind of suspect.
The source is pretty blunt. They're fabricated. Entertainment, basically. They rely heavily on very vague, general statements.
The Barnum effect.
Yeah.
Like P.T. Barnum said, we've got something for everyone.
Exactly that. Or the Forer effect. You read something like, you sometimes doubt your decisions and think, wow, that's totally me. Well, yeah, it's totally most people.
We interpret the vagueness to fit ourselves.
We're wired for it, confirmation bias. We want to find meaning and patterns.
The book makes a great point, too. If signs really dictated personality so strongly, shouldn't we be able to guess someone's sign just by talking to them?
You'd think so, right? But it virtually never works reliably. What happens instead is we find out someone's sign after meeting them, and then we subconsciously look for traits that fit the stereotype we know.
Oh, you're a Gemini. I knew you seemed talkative. Even if they barely spoke.
Precisely. We retrofit the observation to fit the label, and even the idea of being on the cusp, born between signs.
That sounds like hedging your bets anyway.
Well, yeah, and the dates for those cusps aren't even fixed. They can shift slightly year to year because our calendar year isn't perfectly aligned with Earth's orbit. It further weakens the idea of rigid celestial influence tied to specific dates.
You know, the book uses a really modern analogy for influence, comparing zodiac signs to, like, the Apple or Android logo on your phone.
It's a powerful comparison, isn't it? Because those systems, those devices, the apps, the notifications, they actively shape our behavior every single day.
Measurably. How we communicate, what we buy, how we spend our time, even our sleep.
The influence is undeniable and far, far greater and more demonstrable than any supposed influence from the planet Mercury being retrograde. The social media algorithms probably have more sway over your mood than Mars does.
So if the science isn't there, why is astrology still so popular? Why do people still read horoscopes, get charts done?
It's complex. The book points to a few things. History, for one, it's been around for millennia, deeply embedded in culture. Psychology is huge, too.
Offering comfort, meaning
Yeah.
a sense of order in a chaotic world.
All of the above. It provides explanations, a framework, maybe a sense of control or destiny, which can be very appealing. And look, a beautifully drawn natal chart mapping the planets at your birth is aesthetically pleasing.
It looks intricate and meaningful.
It does. But that visual representation of astronomical positions doesn't validate the interpretations or the predictive claims attached to it. Plus, confirmation bias keeps reinforcing it. You remember the hits and forget the misses, and let's face it, sometimes it's just fun.
Okay, so wrapping this up. Astrology and astronomy started together, looking at the same sky.
Yep, shared roots and human curiosity about the cosmos. But they took dramatically different paths.
Astronomy followed the evidence, developing into a science based on observation, math, physics, the scientific method.
While astrology remained more of a system of interpretation and belief, not really evolving with new scientific understanding, still relying on principles set down thousands of years ago before we knew about precession or Uranus or Neptune or galaxies.
So it really boils down to that difference between belief, however comforting or culturally ingrained, and objective evidence-based discovery.
That seems to be the core distinction. And, the book finishes by reminding us of the actual cosmic reality.
Which is pretty mind-blowing in itself.
Totally. We're on this rock, spinning incredibly fast, orbiting a star at enormous speed, and the whole solar system is moving through a galaxy, which is also moving. That actual journey is arguably far more wondrous and wild than any horoscope.
Definitely food for thought. We really hope this deep dive helped clarify some of the lines between astrology and astronomy for you. It's just a fascinating look at how human understanding evolves, isn't it? From those ancient beliefs right up to modern science.
It really is.
So maybe something for you to think about is that human need to find meaning out there in the cosmos. Does the scientific picture, the vastness and indifference, diminish the wonder? Or does understanding the mechanics, the physics, the sheer scale of it all actually make it more awe-inspiring? That's something to ponder as you continue your own journey through knowledge.